Hi, today I'm going to talk about these bracelets I designed and made using living hinges and UV resin. Hi, welcome to Gray Lightning, my video blog about making things and playing games. And in my last video, I talked about living hinges, which is a way to make wood flexible. And I talk about how to design them and how to incorporate them in your laser cutting. And I'll put the link to that video here. At the end of the video, I talked about this bracelet, which it was the first one I designed. And it's a simple bracelet. It has 4 owl motifs on it. It makes it kind of square because it's the 4 and they're all large motifs. It has a built-in clasp where it's a ring of wood that goes around this owl here, and that's what holds it closed naturally. This is the second style of bracelet I designed, and I was trying to get something that was more wrist-shaped, more oval, and this one has a large motif here in the center, and then it has 6 smaller motifs on the sides, and it also has a built-in clasp. But it is in the back, and it's the small leaf here. So, and as you can see, there's many different colorations you can do for these. Not only can you stain the wood, and that's why these are different, but all sorts of colors of UV resin. UV resin's a lot of fun to work with. It cures right away, but it can be a little tricky because it can start getting set sooner than you want it to, and also a lot of times people will have to do sanding afterwards and then put a clear coat over that to make it shiny again. I've figured out a way to do that requires no finishing afterwards. Basically, these all just had a clear coat, no sanding was done on them. So I'm going to talk about how I designed these, some of the options you have, because not only are there leaves and owls, but there are many different motifs you can do. I got both of these, all of these, by working with AI, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll give you my tips on how to work with UV resin, all of that in this episode.
Let's start with the bracelet design. I got my motif images from ChatGPT, and I worked for an hour or 2 to try to get a prompt that would generate this kind of an image that I was looking for. I needed a simple black and white image that I could use image tracing on, and I wanted it connected to the frame so it would stay in one piece when it was cut out. The final thing I did was ask ChatGPT to craft a prompt for me that I could use in the future on similar projects. I'll put this in the description so you can copy and paste it if you'd like to use it. This is the owl bracelet design, and in my last video on living hinges, I show step-by-step how to create the living hinge part of this pattern. I ended up cutting another copy of this owl here because I stacked 3 layers of owls inside of the clasp. My second design was the leaf bracelet, and you can see here the living hinge segments are narrower, as are those narrower leaf designs. And the blue line shows the engraved location of the leaf clasp. I glue the cutout leaf on the partial leaf, the layer below it. I glue that assembly inside that engraving, and that makes a hook for the clasp. I cut these out of 1/8 inch basswood plywood, and here it is cutting on my We Create Vision. Be sure to watch my video on living hinges because this needs to be oriented properly with the grain of your plywood. Now it's time to decorate the bracelets with UV resin. I bought this starter kit on Amazon. I used less than 1 bottle to do all the bracelets. It comes with silicone tools that you need for working with resin. This little pointy tool here is extremely important for popping bubbles. And it has this little UV light, but you're really better off waiting for a sunny day to do your project. To dress up your clear resin, you need some pigments, and I got this kit right here. Make sure you pick resins that say that they work with UV resin, and look for one that has white in the color assortment, because 1 drop of that will make these transparent colors more opaque. Another very important item is resin tape, and you'll see in just a bit how I use that in my no sanding technique. If you already don't have these in your shop, you should get some of these pipettes so you can apply the resin carefully. All the supplies I've shown you so far you can buy in total for less than $40. And you'll have enough of everything left over to do more resin projects. I bought one other bottle of resin that's called Soft Type, and it's actually flexible. I'm running experiments right now where I actually paint that onto the living hinges. I know for a fact it doesn't prevent them from flexing. I just don't know yet if it adds to the durability of the hinge, which is why you would do it. Your first step in preparing the piece would be to stain it if you want to stain it. Whenever I did something that touched the hinges themselves, I would set it up on end like this and flex it a little bit while it dried. The next step is to spray on a clear coat on both sides of the piece, and you do this whether it's stained or unstained. I also set these up on edge to dry. You spray them with clear coat to prevent the resin from soaking into the wood grain. I had an experimental piece where I did it the way I saw on the internet, which is filling it from the top and then overfilling it, in fact, and then you were supposed to sand it flat. But it was very hard to sand this. It's very hard acrylic when it's dry. And when I flipped it over, I noticed that the back side looked a lot better than the front side. Look at this little single piece here. This is the front, and this is the back. And it's much clearer on the back. So my solution was to put the resin tape on the top of the project, on the front of it. And you have to make sure that it's completely adhered all around the border of the motif and on the content of the motif. The better the seal, the better the final result. Then you flip the piece over and you fill it from the back. It has to be perfectly level. So once I flipped it, that clasp owl is 3 layers thick. So I had to put the rest of the bracelet on some scrap wood, 2 layers of scrap wood to keep it all level. You mix the resin in these little silicone cups. I have already filled it about half full with the clear resin. Now the colors they come sealed, but they have little needles inside of those orange caps that you can use to pierce them. And then I ended up putting 4 drops of pigment in each one of these 1/2 to 2/3 filled cups. I used the pipette to stir it. And I considered putting a drop of white in this because that makes it it depends on how much you add, but it makes it a little bit more opaque, more translucent than transparent. But I kept it pretty much pure blue, transparent blue. The basic process is you carefully and methodically fill each little section, and then you'll set down the pipette and pick up the very important pointy little silicone tool. And then you have to tap around with that point everywhere a bubble might be forming. Remember, you're working from the back, so the bubbles are going to be down underneath and they'll be on the front if you miss them. So the bubbles tend to form around the edges of the wood and in the very small spaces. So those you just have to keep going back and tapping around with the pointy tool. And you keep alternating until you fill in the whole design. As the UV resin starts to cure, and it will start a little bit even while you're working here, you can go back to the early sections you filled and put more in because they tend to get lower as they dry, so you can fill them in a little more. The owl clasp, because it's 3 levels deep, requires a lot more resin to fill, but it also requires that you be a lot more diligent about using the pointy tool to search for bubbles. They can prevent chambers from filling. Then you carefully transfer the piece to the sunshine, and you start with the filled side up, but you can also then flip that over and cure it from the other side as well. I had some problems with this green resin, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. But you not only cure the bracelet, you cure everything out here. You cure your tools as well, because, well, you're doing the pipette just so it's safe when you throw it away, but that's how you clean your silicone tools, is you can just peel the resin off it after it's cleared. I mentioned I had some problems with the green resin, and it kept getting too thick to work with while I was still working with it. You can see how much resin I wasted while I was figuring this out. I ended up having to use this plastic bowl, and I would turn it over and cover the silicone cup whenever I wasn't using it. I also put less in the pipette each time. I worked with a lot of different colors, and this is the only color that this happened with. You just need to be aware that when you're adding things to the resin, it can affect the way the resin behaves, even when you're consistent with the number of drops you add. All in all, I think this is a great little project. It only takes 13 minutes to cut one of these bracelets, so you can turn out a bunch of them and you can do different motifs for different people. It would be a great shared craft project, and the materials are pretty inexpensive, so I highly recommend it. I already have a couple of other great projects using living hinges. If you're interested, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you know when a new video has been posted.